Live here on AMP with my main man back from Augusta. I got to read this DM to Jason Sobel in my Instagram mentions. It said, tell Sobel he was great on the Masters radio broadcast on Thursday. You're crushing it. Are you alive? How you doing?
Well, first of all, I'll tell whoever sent you that DM, thank you. Nick, thanks, Nick. I'm doing well. Look, that is a long week for a whole lot of reasons. I wish I could bring somebody along with me and just show them like what it's like. A lot of people go, oh man, that's so cool. You got to go to Augusta and see the Masters. And yes, that's a big part of it as well. But stayed in the house with four of my buddies who all do Sirius XM PGA Tour radio. And we're all just hanging out, having a good time all week. Team no sleep for the entire week, working a ton, get back and get after it every night. I woke up at 5 a.m. Monday morning, drove 7 hours home to Orlando, did my show, crashed for like 4 hours, woke up and wrote about the RBC Heritage until 2 in the morning. It's nuts, but I love every second of it.
You should have told the Action Network you're going Rory. Like, I'm out on the RBC. Like, I'm taking the week off.
Only got so many bullets in the chamber. I'm going to save them for later this summer. We got some stuff brewing.
The tournament was a little weird just based on the weather. I know. I think Saturday morning you were tweeting how bad the weather was from inside. You've been going to this tournament for a long time. I mean, that looked like Ireland. I mean, that was when Cam Young and Jon Rahm are struggling to hit it 240 yards off the tee. Yeah. It's not just cold, wet. I mean, that's tough, man.
All of that said, look, we don't have a direct line to Mother Nature. I don't know, maybe people at Augusta National, if you have a green jacket, you can just get on the line with Mother Nature and tell her exactly what you want. But you can't dial up the weather. If you could, I love the idea of having different weather patterns throughout a 4-round tournament. So it's not just 72 and sunny and a 1-club wind for 4 days. It's not just 55 and windy for 4 days. It's not just raining for 4 days. Like, hey, give me a little bit of everything. We're trying to identify the best player, and we want to find the best player in all different types of conditions. I thought that part of it's great. Now, granted, half the guys got screwed with the wrong part of the draw when Brooks Koepka's sitting back in the rental house sipping on hot cocoa on Saturday morning, and Jon Rahm's trying to hit a 3-iron 180 yards. Maybe that's not exactly quote unquote fair, but it's the luck of the draw. And I love it when events, this is like the Players Championship last year, which lasted 5 days, but we had all 4 seasons. I thought it was very much the same. And it's almost like playing a video game. You know, the old Tiger Woods video games. I guess there are more golf video games out there. I don't play them these days, but where you can just dial up the weather. You say, okay, this round we're going to play in rain and a 25-mile-an-hour wind. And then this round we're going to turn up the heat to 95 degrees and just have it be like humid as heck. I like the fact that we had different weather patterns, and I like that at major championships.
You know, you picked him before. I mean, he's been one of the best players in the world for a long time now. It was kind of between the 3 guys. I was kicking myself immediately after he came storming back after the 4-putt. This guy now, he's got that second major. It felt like this year kind of the dam had broke, like, okay, it's on. Rahm has figured it out. But at this tournament specifically, 4th, 9th, 7th, 5th, now he's won it. I think most people that follow the sport would pick this guy to win several majors just in general, whether that's 4, 7, whatever. But this tournament, it feels like it'd be a shocker if he doesn't win this thing again.
Yeah, I mean, look, we always say that on Tuesday after a guy wins one, and we're like, well, if he plays like that, he's going to win every single time. Well, that's the whole point is he doesn't play like that. That said, yes, I do agree with you that Jon Rahm doesn't seem like a one and done at Augusta National. Like he's going to pack it up and leave. But funny things happen. I mean, we would have thought by this point that Rory McIlroy would have 3 of these things.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, he does not. We'll get into him, I know, but I was so impressed with the way Rahm persevered. As you mentioned, I picked him last week on your show. I picked him on 1,000 other shows that I did before the Masters. And I'm walking through the press building in Augusta National, and I didn't see the first hole, but I look up at the big board, and all I see is Rahm +2 through 1. And I'm like, you've got to be freaking kidding me. Like, wow. I just picked him everywhere. Like, give me a chance, John. Just give me a chance. All of a sudden, everyone's chirping at me on Twitter, like, oh, Sobel jinxed him. He birdies the next 2. winds up making 9 birdies on the day, shoots 65. It's actually like that perseverance. And I talked about him playing through the bad weather and him going into Sunday trailing a guy that's known to win major championships. All of those things together is what I thought was the most impressive part of Rahm. The fact that he persevered after being down in each of those situations. I don't think that Rahm 2 or 3 years ago could have handled that. Rahm 2 or 3 years ago snaps a club over his knee, throws something into the woods, and gets too fired up about what's going on. I thought there was a calmness around him that really helped this week.
Totally agree. I mean, Tiger kind of had it from the jump, the mental toughness. Phil learned it over time. I think it's a question mark with Rory. I think Jordan has it, but is it good enough consistently? Like, this guy clearly is good enough. And if he's got the mentals right, holy shit. I mean, on the flip side, a guy that's also had it, it feels like from pretty early in his career, was Koepka. It's hard to say he choked. I mean, he got the better end of the draw. He definitely didn't play well. Your vantage point, I mean, he's a guy that, which I appreciate, hauls ass when he plays, playing in front of, I don't know, or behind the slowest human being of all time in Patrick Cantlay. So twofold. Thoughts on Brooks and the slow play situation? Was that, some of the talk of the Sunday?
Yeah, I'll start with slow play, and it was bad. Patrick Cantlay, I get it. Look, I can see both sides of this because I've often been a defender of these players who, look, it's not your Sunday afternoon 4-ball where you're just kind of like, hey man, come on, hit that putt, let's go.
But you can't shoot 75 and go that slow though, right? You can shoot 69. Yeah, 75 is
even, I don't care if you're shooting 63. Like, at some point, hit the ball. Like, you just got to hit the ball. You just got to be confident in yourself and go, all right, what's the number? Got it. Let me hit it. And you've just got to do it. And so it's not a matter of like shaving off time. It's a matter of respect for your fellow players. I mean, Koepka and Rahm, there's a great shot of them sitting together in a tee box, looking out there, waiting. Koepka was asked about it after the round, and he's like, oh my God, was it slow? He said they were slow up there, but that was not, I think he was playing with Hovland, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Hovland was not slow. Hovland was walking ahead, hitting shots before Cantlay even hit before him. So that was one guy, and Cantlay's got to do something about it. He will be hearing some things about that in the locker room at Harbour Town this week. You can bet that. So getting back to Koepka, look, he hasn't been in this situation for a while. 1 year ago, he left Augusta National completely filled with doubt. So he tried to punch a hole through his car's windshield, the back windshield, and tried twice, couldn't do it. But he was very disappointed in his own play and very uncertain about the future. And I think that led to him going to LIV. I mean, we all saw Full Swing where he was doubting his future, doubting whether he could ever beat the world's best players again. I think that led to him going to LIV. He admitted that if he hadn't been hurt last year, if he hadn't been playing poorly, he might have thought twice about going to LIV. And so the fact that he's able to come back, I still think, and I maintain this all the time, guys that get into contention at major championships, even if they don't win, the general public looks at it as a negative. He will take more positives from this. He will know and understand coming out of this, like, all right, I'm good now. I can go out there and compete with the world's best players. I can go win another major or handful of majors. And so I do think that Brooks gains more optimism from this than pessimism. That said, two of the biggest alphas in the sport playing together on Sunday afternoon. Jon Rahm absolutely out-alpha'd Brooks Koepka. I mean, there were times Koepka's going to hit his shot and Rahm's walking up ahead. Rahm did the Tiger thing where, look, we all know Tiger wore red on Sundays. There was a reason for that, besides just the ones he's said. When you're standing over your ball and you can see a little speck of red out of the corner of your eye on the tee box, that tells you in the back of your mind, hey, Tiger's right there. He's coming for me. And Jon Rahm did a very good job of getting in Brooks Koepka's eye line whenever he needed to. I thought he won the mind games, and that helped him win the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, it was less a down moment for Brooks because it was actually overall an incredible showing for the guy. And I think moving forward in the majors, he's going to have to be taken seriously on our betting cards, the way we discuss, and more of just a massive muscle flex for a guy that should go down if he stays healthy as one of the great players, not just of his era, but potentially internationally, of all time. I mean, his ceiling's really high. Speaking of guys with high ceilings, obviously Phil, I mean, he's one of the great players in the history of the sport. The LIV guys being on site, pretty cool moment, with Jordan and Phil. P. Reed had a pretty, an incredible weekend. Obviously, Brooks kind of led the charge. What was the overall reaction from your vantage point, hearing the roars, seeing the guys from LIV, and Phil specifically, who felt like he kind of went mute at the dinner, pretty quiet, kind of started coming out of his shell as he started playing better. It felt like, from us watching him on TV.
Look, if I'm supposed to explain Phil, I don't know how I'm going to do that. I have no explanation for this guy.
What did you hear? What did you hear about the dinner? What was the thoughts on?
Same as everyone else heard. I mean, I didn't hear anything different, but just that he was a little muted. It wasn't the traditional Phil. And I'll tell you that I've written stories in the past where Phil has stood up and held court in the middle of the champions dinner, just trying to be the smartest guy in the room and explain things to everybody else. Hey, here's why they call it this. And, Adam Scott brought pavlova for dessert one time, and Phil Mickelson stood up and he said, oh, pavlova is actually because this old pastry maker was in love with a Russian ballerina and he named it after her. And there was none of that this week. And I think Phil, even on the golf course, seemed a little bashful almost. Seemed, this wasn't the usual Phil where he was a little arrogant, a little brash. This was Phil sort of just, hey, I'm playing golf. Thanks, guys. I'll give you a little thumbs up. But it was not the same old Phil. There's more gratitude, more thankfulness for being able to go out there and play. So it reminded me a lot of Kiowa. And Kiowa 2 years ago, Phil kept telling everyone, hey, I'm playing really well. It's coming real soon. And everyone else is going, no, I'm looking at your results. It's not coming soon. And Phil proved himself right. And same thing here. Phil said from the beginning of the week, yeah, I know good things are right around the corner. I'm playing really well. And I'm sitting there looking at his LIV results. They only have 48 players in these events. He hadn't finished better than 27th all year. So I'm like, no, he's going to all of a sudden play well at the Masters. And yet, lo and behold, there's Phil playing really well. So that's the part of Phil that I thought was very intriguing. As for the LIV players themselves, I think anyone who wanted to come into this with the belief that, hey, they don't play quote unquote real golf anymore, and they can't play more than 54 holes, and they can't play without music blaring, and they can't play in long pants. I think all of that can be dismissed now. And I think we understand these are still world-class golfers. They can show up for a week at Augusta and play good golf. I wouldn't be surprised if at the PGA Championship a month from now, we see a handful of more LIV players on the leaderboard once again. And I'll also throw it out, John, that look, I'm an optimistic guy. I'm going to give you the silver lining here. There's a non-zero chance that not having the best players in the world all playing against each other on a regular basis almost makes us anticipate the four majors even more now. We don't get Jon Rahm and Brooks Koepka against each other for the first 3 months of the year. All of a sudden, okay, now let's see what those guys have. Let's see what these guys have. Let's see them up against each other. I think it makes the majors even more exciting than they were before.
Totally agree. I mean, I'm sure you saw this morning, the ratings were up. The Koepka versus Rahm. I mean, by no means is that Tiger versus Phil, but holy, I mean, that's, right. I think that's a direct reflection of that story transcended, quote unquote niche golf, right? It became a non-sport story because of the political aspects of it. I was reading your gambling column this morning and I was texting with someone because buddies with Spencer Levine, who Monday qualifies for the Corn Ferry. I'm like, why do you have to do that? And it's because all these guys, the PGA Tour guys, are playing in it because it's an elevated week. Yeah. It's like, what? Listen, I don't pretend to be Jay Monahan here, but what are we doing? Like, should we take a week off after, or just you just keep rattling it off? Obviously, they've always played after majors, but
yeah, they're not taking a week off. And look, if RBC wants to put in the money as a sponsor and say, hey, we'll step up, we'll put in the money to have a designated event and have the best players at our event, they go, okay, sounds good to us. And all of a sudden, you've got the best players showing up to Hilton Head this week. And my guess is you're going to see a lot of top players. We're going to know who wants to be there and who doesn't, because you're going to see a lot of top players going home on Friday afternoon. You just are. Guys who are just wiped. Jordan Spieth, who's the defending champion and would have been showing up anyway, talked about after the Masters being exhausted. And I'm almost surprised that he's teeing it up. Rory McIlroy isn't teeing it up. I don't understand it. He's only allowed to skip one designated event. Essentially, they're supposed to give up their player impact program money if they don't play all but one designated event. He skipped Kapalua already, now skips this one. He made $12 million in the PIP. I can't imagine that he's saying, hey, I'm going to skip Harbour Town. I don't need the extra 12 mil. That's sort of the point of giving them all more money. I don't understand that whatsoever, but Rory won't be there. Most of the big names will be. I wouldn't be surprised if, look, it would take a lot for Jon Rahm to miss the cut, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jon Rahm's somewhere in the 20s or 30s on the leaderboard this week. He's not going to be able to get up for it.
Like, I'm sorry, if Jon Rahm can play in this thing, Roy, you didn't do anything all weekend, unless you're injured or something. I mean, that's
mental anguish. I don't know.
Well, back to Rory. What happened?
That was appalling. I don't know how else to put it. That was one of the most disappointing rounds of golf I've seen from a professional golfer in a long time. He shot 72 in the first round. Okay, not terrible. We're 7 back. Look, the way he came back on the weekend last year, that's fine. 77 in round 2. He tied Jose Maria Olazabal, who doesn't even play on the senior tour anymore. And it wasn't even just the score. It was the way he did it. I watched him that day, and after a few of the bogeys, he had this little smile on his face. And I'm not suggesting that Rory was happy about making bogeys. It was almost like he was resigned to the fate. He was resigned to, all right, it's just Augusta National. I can't do it. Never going to do it. I can't win here. Sort of like what Sergio said before he finally did win. And maybe Rory needs to get to that point where he tells himself, I'll never win here, so I'm going to give up. And then he goes out and wins the next year. I don't know. He's tried everything else. He's tried to make it mean everything. He's tried to trick himself into having it mean nothing. He's tried to play no golf there beforehand. Last week, he played 81 holes of golf in the week leading up to it. I don't know that there's a strategy that's going to work for him other than just saying, okay, I give up. Augusta wins. I lose. I'll never win there. It worked for Sergio. Maybe it works for him, but that was terrible. The fact that Rory McIlroy misses a, 54-man cut in an 88-man field, that's embarrassing.
I totally agree. I mean, you saw Scotty Scheffler couldn't putt to save his life and was still battling his ass off. Right. There's a level of, I think in sports, whether it's Steph Curry, Giannis, and the top guys in basketball and football, like there's just a level of expectation when the moment's the biggest for you to try hard, So this week is the strategy. I know you have Sanjay M. You taking a guy that, there's a lot of guys that a little under the radar last week that played well. I saw Gary Woodland, some names, some of these guys that feel like they're just kind of out of gas, or a Davis Riley or Ricky Fowler that didn't play last week, that come in fresh to get an advantage. It feels like this is a hard gambling card.
Yeah. So in the past, there are a handful of players that would go from the Masters to Harbour Town, and I'd always try to fade them. The narrative being, they played the pressure cooker, and now how are they going to get up for the next event? And let's just go on to the other guys. And narrative doesn't really play out. I mean, we saw Jordan Spieth and Patrick Cantlay in a playoff here last year. Their players are good no matter where they're playing. They probably got a nap on Monday afternoon, just like I did, and they're ready to go this week. So I'm not necessarily crossing them off the card. The guys that I'm looking at, though, are the ones that normally play at Harbour Town anyway, and not the guys who are only playing because it's a designated event. So Rahm, for instance, played here in 2020. That was during the pandemic, and that's the only time he played here. And he doesn't usually show up. I can't imagine that he's just going to show up and play good golf. Max Homa, same thing. Played in 2020. That's the only time he's played here. I can't imagine he's going to show up and play his best golf. So I'm looking at the guys who normally come year after year anyway and are used to this. Sanjay plays a ton of golf anyway, so it's not going to really bother him playing the week after the Masters. Trending in the right direction. Does everything really well. The one thing he doesn't have against the best players in the world is driving distance, and that's the one thing you don't need this week. 7,200 yards. Most of the big names will leave driver in the bag on a lot of these holes anyway. I think it's a great course for Sanjay to go out there and get that third win.
Well, Thagala, who had about 17 different moments at the Masters, ugly, great. He's all over the map. He's probably the best player on tour that can't really drive it straight at all. Does that benefit him here this week? You just don't even pull it out because his short game, and obviously he can score, and his odds, just looking at it for guys that, he's not a guy that's mailing it in at this point in time of his career. So you get him 60, 65 to 1. Is there some value, or this course? Is it you know, hasn't like Harmon, I mean, Kisner, I mean, guys like that can
Yeah.
really have success here. So it's not your typical modern day PGA Tour course anymore, right?
Shorter golf course. Everyone has a chance here, no matter if you hit it 260 or 330. I like Thigala for outrights because I think that ceiling is massive, and I think
Yeah.
he might be coming off some momentum last week. I don't like him as much for props, for DFS, for other safer plays because I do think there's a wide variance there, and we've seen that from Sahith. As much as I like him, and I think he's going to be an absolute superstar if he's not almost there already, I do think that there's a wide range of outcomes for him as opposed to some of the other players in his price range that maybe they won't win, but they're a pretty good bet for a top 20. Sahith's still a little all or nothing on a regular basis. So I like the outright play, but I'm not playing him for top 20s because I think there's too much of a range there that he can finish outside of that.
I know this. I start seeing Sam Burns creep up around 40 to 1, 35 to 1 range. It's like I live bet him last week at the Masters, and then he started just bogeying everything in sight. But his pants are tight.
Pants are way too tight.
Like to me, him and Hovland are like having a tight pants off.
By the way, can I please just come out in support of Hovland's Thursday shirt, which I told Victor. I interviewed Victor after the round. I'm like, dude, I like it. And he kind of looked at me like, like he didn't like it, but he's like, oh, well, thanks. Like, you can have it if you want, one of those kind of things. But I thought it was good. I thought it was a good look.
Are you coming around on my guy Hovland? I mean, this guy's he's
really
getting bad. What's your issue with him?
You chip. He's terrible around the greens. Harbour Town this week. I was doing my podcast with Ben Everill last night, and Everill picked Hovland for something. And I go, it's a short course with small greens. You're not going to hit them all, which means you have to get up and down. And he sucks at chipping. I mean, that's not my words. Those are his words. We know this. I find my mind is actually blown by Victor Hovland, how he can be a top 10 player and still have one aspect of his game as poor as it is right now. I think it's getting better. He's talked about it getting better, but until it gets just to field average level, I have a hard time going after Hovland unless it's a course where it's big fairways and especially big greens. Give me a big resort course, which is where he's won before.
Yeah.
A big old resort course with those big greens where he doesn't have to chip because he's hitting 16, 17 greens and Greg every round.
Are you better off in your career around these guys being like the Zalatoris or Morikawa? I know kind of struggled at both, but just struggling at putting, Keegan Bradley historically, or a guy that just can't really chip? Would you rather have one? Because it does feel like amateur golfer here, chipping is more improvable than if putting's always in your head.
Yeah, I mean, the ball striking obviously is sustainable. They can all putt. There are very few bad putt. If you're a bad putter, you're not playing on the PGA Tour. You're either a
relatively speaking,
good putter. Which is weird that Victor Hovland he's a pretty average putter, like average in relation to like any level of professional golf, not just PGA Tour level. So that's what it's not that he's not great at chipping. It's like no, he's like really bad at it. I guess let's say, would you rather be a bad chipper or a bad putter? I guess chipper. You can get away with like.
Well, but my take is you can improve. It's easier to make an improvement there. I feel.
I suppose so. It's also easier to get away from it. I played a member guest a couple of weeks ago with a buddy who was really struggling with his chipping. By the time we got to our second or third match, we're talking over shots, and he goes, what do you like here? I go, put it in the middle of the green so I don't have to see you chip anymore. And so essentially, if you're Shea Knight, Victor Hovland's caddy, at some point when he's not chipping well, you go, just hit it in the middle of the green and putt, so I don't have to watch you chip.
Did you see the picture of Phil using the putter on the driving range?
I did not see that.
Someone's like, it's a bold move to use the Texas wedge on the driving range, but Phil did it. So, well, I'm glad you recovered, and let's we get a nice chill weekend now, a little RBC Heritage. Now it's not quite the Masters.
Covered this one time back in 2015. I followed Jordan there after he won the Masters, and I'm telling you, there is no better chill spot after a major championship to go, whether you're a competitor in the field and playing, whether you're someone in the media covering it, whether you're a fan and wanted to watch both of them. It is a very cool spot for these guys. So even the guys that don't show up every year, they're going to enjoy it this time.
Agree. Well, Sobel, have a good week, and we will talk to you next weekend. And the second major is not too far away.
We're getting there. Can't wait. Bundle up. 50 degrees in Rochester next month.
Let's do it.